Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Tuesday, our Tech Tuesday evening. And we start another series tonight. And I've been noticing a lot, and I don't know if it's just me noticing it, but I seem to be seeing a lot of extra people suffering from depression or various stages of depression um, all around for various different reasons. At work, in hospital, people seem to be having a tough time. And I think there's a number of different reasons for that. Obviously, life in general is getting more and more exciting these days and challenging, and a lot of people it's getting tired. But this, unfortunately, is manifesting in this horrible condition called depression. But what is depression? Is it just feeling down? Is it feeling sad? What is it? It's actually a medical condition. So I'm going to share my screen and go through a little bit of the research I've been doing just recently. It's been quite interesting because there's a lot more to this than what I even thought. So the research has been quite an eye-opener for me. So we can just lose all the other pictures over here. And it's actually quite a broad topic as well, because I had to edit myself down a little bit, otherwise I could keep this going for probably the rest of the year. And that was just from the one article that I was reading. So depression, I've titled it The Lowdown of Feeling Down. What is depression and what can we do about it? So, pardon me, this is taken from a Medical News Today article. Depression is a chronic feeling of emptiness, sadness, or inability to feel pleasure that may appear to happen for no clear reason. It is distinct from grief and other emotions. Depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide, according to the World Health Organization. Because if you're chronically depressed, pardon me, if you're chronically depressed, that can affect your life, your lifestyle, your career, and it can be quite debilitating because some people get to the stage where they literally cannot leave home because of the depression. And it can undermine a person's relationships, which make working and maintaining good health extremely difficult, and in severe cases may lead to suicide. And we've heard of all these well-known people who have been affected by depression to the extent where suicide seemingly to them was the only option. And some very well-known people have suffered from depression. And I was quite intrigued by the number of names that were listed. I won't go through all of that because it's immaterial to this particular session. But if you do a little bit of research on depression and well-known people who have or have had bouts of depression or have committed suicide as a result of depression, it's quite scary. In fact, depression contributes to nearly 40,000 suicides in the US each year. That is an awful lot of people. It can affect adults, adolescents, and children. Now, children should be young, happy, free-going. Why are they suffering from depression? This is not something that should be happening. Kids should be outside, playing with each other, playing in the garden, getting fresh air, playing sports, being healthy. Yet they're suffering from depression and actually committing suicide. I see it at work. Scarily, the number of people that come through casualty, and I look at the ages of the people who come through casualty suffering or having had an overdose, in other words, attempted suicide. And their kids as young as 12 and 13 who come through casualty having attempted suicide. This is not a good thing. There's so much peer pressure these days on kids that it's no wonder. That is just one of the many reasons. But what is this thing? We talk about depression, but what is it? It is a mood disorder that causes persistent feelings of sadness, emptiness, and loss of joy. It is different from the mood fluctuations that people regularly experience as a part of life. Major life events such as bereavement or the loss of a job can trigger depression. But depression is distinct from the negative feelings a person may temporarily have in response to a difficult life event. And those events, as listed over here, loss of a job, death in the family, divorce, big things like that. Depression often persists in spite of a change of circumstances and causes feelings that are intense, chronic, and not proportional to a person's circumstances. It is an ongoing problem, not a passing one. While there are different types of depression, the most common one is major depressive disorder. It consists of episodes during which the symptoms last for at least 2 weeks. Depression can last for several weeks, months, or years. For many people, it is a chronic illness that gets better and then relapses. Just like a lot of other chronic diseases, you don't class it as being cured, but you do class it as being in remission. So the next question, is it curable? While there is no cure for depression, there are effective treatments that help with recovery. The earlier that treatment starts, the more successful it may be. Some people may never experience depression again after a single period of it. Others will continue to have relapses. Many people experiencing depression recover after a treatment plan. Even with effective treatment, however, a relapse may occur. About half of people do not initially respond to treatment. That's quite a scary one as well. But to prevent relapse, people who take medication for depression should continue with the treatment, even after symptoms improve or go away, for as long as their doctor advises. Now, one obviously has to work with this very carefully, and it's a little bit like taking an antibiotic. You take an antibiotic, and maybe they've given you a course of 7 days, but after 3 days, you feel fine. Don't quit taking that antibiotic. You need to do the full 7 days. So, same with your antidepressant medication. If you take it for 2 weeks, but your doctor's prescribed it for 6, the problem comes is that you now stop your medication, the depression comes back, but it comes back worse. And the medication that you had now quite probably is no longer effective. And therefore, you've got to have heavier and heavier medication and longer treatment plans before it actually takes effect. So some of the signs and symptoms. Depression can cause a range of psychological and physical symptoms, including persistent depressed mood, loss of interest or pleasure in hobbies and activities, changes in appetite and body weight, and usually slow or agitated movement. So either moving at, I hesitate to say, government pace, or really hyper and on the go all the time. Decreased energy or fatigue, difficulty sleeping or oversleeping. So there's quite a wide range of different signs and symptoms. Excessive feelings of guilt or worthlessness, difficulty concentrating or making decisions, thoughts of death or suicide, or even suicide attempts. If a person experiences 5 or more of these symptoms during the same 2-week period, a doctor may diagnose them with depression. Depression may also cause other symptoms including irritability, restlessness, chronic pain, headaches, and digestive disorders. So when you look at this list of signs and symptoms, please note that they are symptoms, and they're symptoms of numerous other different things as well. So you need to see somebody who can diagnose you correctly and make sure that it's not something else. Because when I look at this list of signs and symptoms over here, I can identify probably about 4 or 5 other conditions with similar signs and symptoms. So one can't just say, oh, I've got this, I've got depression. Oh, I've got that, I've got depression. You've got to work this in context, like with most other things. And this is why you need to see somebody who's trained and qualified and hopefully is a very good diagnostician to be able to rule out what the problem isn't so that they can figure out what the problem is. Because that, unfortunately, is what your doctor has to do. You go and present him with a list of symptoms, and he's got to work out, and this is why they do umpteen tests, because they've got to work out what the problem isn't before they can tell you what the problem is, and then develop a treatment plan. So you get different types of depression, and one of them is major depression. A person living with major depression experiences a constant state of sadness. They may lose interest in activities that they used to enjoy. Treatment usually involves medication and psychotherapy. Then you get the persistent depressive disorder, also known as dysthymia. Persistent depressive disorder causes symptoms that last for at least 2 years. These are the chronic, long-acting problems. A person living with this disorder may have episodes of major depression as well as milder symptoms that do not meet the criteria for major depressive disorder. You can see how difficult it is to diagnose this. You then get postpartum depression, which I see a bit of every so often. And after giving birth, some people experience a brief period of sadness or heightened emotions that some people call baby blues. Now, this usually goes away in a few days to a few weeks. Postpartum depression or postnatal depression is more severe. There is no single cause for this type of depression, and it can persist for months or years. Anyone who experiences ongoing depression after delivery should seek medical attention. Now, I can't remember if it was John Miller or Don Lawson who gave a pretty good explanation for postpartum depression. And their explanation was that you've given birth, sometimes a difficult birth, and I've seen quite a few of those just recently. And now they're going to breastfeed, but their diet isn't optimum. Baby is a sucker in more ways than one. And they suck out the calcium out of mom. And when there's a sudden drop of calcium in the system, that can lead to what's known as postpartum depression. Once the calcium levels are boosted and everything is back in normality, that depression goes away. So this postpartum depression can be quite serious, and I've seen a couple of these scary cases. But a lot of the time, it's just simply a sudden depletion of calcium because mom didn't have enough calcium in her system to start with. Now remember, when she's carrying baby, according to Dr. Barry Bland, that baby is a parasite because it is sucking all the nutrients that it needs for growth from mom. And if mom is not getting those nutrients from her diet, she is going to be depleted. She is going to have problems. Or, worst case, if she's not getting enough of those nutrients from her diet and from supplements, and baby isn't getting enough nutrients from her diet, baby's going to have problems. So it's so important to keep all these things in equilibrium. Then you get major depressive disorder with seasonal pattern. And this was previously known as seasonal affective disorder. Sorry. This type of depression usually occurs during the winter in 4 months when there is less daylight. And this happens more in the northern hemisphere where the days are or the days are significantly shorter, the nights are significantly longer. Now, as you know, with daylight, you get vitamin D. This is one of the problems because the vitamin D levels drop, and now they end up with this sad depression. And probably some places in this country as well, because I know if you think about places like Cape Town in the middle of winter, they have quite a long night and quite a short day, often accompanied by pouring, freezing cold rain. It doesn't take much to get depressed. And I see this a lot with patients in hospital as well, especially those who've been in hospital for more than a week. They start getting very depressed. And as I often jokingly say to them, it feels like the walls are coming in on you and the ceiling is coming down on you because you're tied up in this little bed and you don't see daylight. There's people around you, there's activity around you, there's a TV above you. Depending on which ward you're in, you might be connected to a whole lot of extremely noisy monitors and things that are squeezing you and pumping you, and they're filling you full of medication. You had surgery, so you're feeling sorry for yourself because you're in pain. And for whatever reason that you're there, maybe you had a major car accident, so you're now stressed. So the stress comes about over there as well. You're having medication that can lead to problems. Depression is going to hit you, and it is something that can set back the treatment. So less commonly, it may follow other seasonal patterns as well. It lifts during the rest of the year in response to light therapy. So you do get lights that are at the same wavelength as daylight, and they're called daylight bulbs. So if you are somebody or you know somebody who suffers with this seasonal affective disorder, because they are stuck inside all the time, they never get to see fresh air, they never get to move outside for various different reasons. So ask them to look into getting daylight light bulbs. And this is the same wavelength as daylight. And I'm told it makes a significant difference. This condition seems to particularly affect people who live in countries with long, severe winters. Now, if you think about the Northern Hemisphere, and I look at people up in where Louis Smith is in Lake Hume, to northern parts of California, and where a lot of my wife's family is up in Minnesota, they can get snowed in where they've got to literally dig themselves out of their homes. And they don't get to go anywhere because the roads are closed because there's so much snow. They don't even get to see outside. And when they do, they're so tightly bundled up against the cold, they're still not exposed to sufficient daylight. I've experienced a Minnesota winter. It wasn't fun. Minus 25 degrees Celsius. Your freezer probably gets down to about minus 12, minus 15. Stick your head in there and breathe in, and you'll get a rough idea of what it's like. So now, what causes depression? We've been through some of the causes. What are the others? The medical community does not fully understand the causes of depression. Now, there is a very comforting thought for you. You have depression. Why? Well, it might be this, it might be that, it might be something else. I can't tell you. And medically, we have a lovely term for this sort of thing. It's called idiopathic. So unless they can say, okay, you've got postpartum depression, you've got post-traumatic stress disorder, you've got what else? It's otherwise known as idiopathic. Anytime you hear that word idiopathic, it means we have no idea what caused the problem. Factors that are likely to play a role include things like genetic features, changes in the brain's neurotransmitter levels for various different reasons, environmental factors such as exposure to trauma or lack of social support. You get people who have been disowned by their family, or their family got wiped out. Think of people overseas who have experienced hurricanes and tornadoes or floods or earthquakes, and suddenly the entire family's been wiped out, or they've been in a major car accident and the entire family's been wiped out, and they don't have any other family around. They lack social support, and they've had massive trauma. Yes, they are going to get depressed. Psychological and social factors also play a role, and additional conditions such as bipolar disorder also play a role in depression. So the symptoms of depression can include a depressed mood, and it's just that I'm feeling down, I'm feeling sad. Ask somebody, how are you? Okay. And you can see by their body language and by their face and by their eyes, they're not good. The other symptoms are a reduced interest or pleasure in activities that a person previously enjoyed. They used to enjoy playing golf, and now it's a heavy task. They used to enjoy going for a walk on the beach, and now they go, oh, no, I really don't feel like it. Those sort of things, where they used to be on fire for something, and suddenly, lost all interest. A loss of sexual desire, changes in appetite. They either don't want to eat at all, which is a more common problem, or they binge eat. Unintentional weight loss or gain. And there again, if they're binge eating, they're going to gain weight. And they can't understand it because last week I weighed 50 kilos and this week I weigh 65 kilos. What happened? Or vice versa, because they haven't been eating. I saw this with my mother. I know Jenny will be able to probably explain a little bit more. But when she was living on her own, she just wouldn't eat. She would prepare the food and then lose all interest in actually eating it. And it would go to waste. And she lost incredible amounts of weight as a result. Sleeping too much or too little. You see these people who just, they want to sleep the entire day away. Or they sleep for 2 hours at a time. Often jokingly say, do you know what the definition of sleeping like a baby is? It means waking up every 2 hours crying. And this is what happens. You have too little sleep. So you get tired and then you eat and then maybe you drink, or you want to go to sleep, but you just can't fall asleep. Your brain is hyperactive. All of these things can lead to depression, agitation, restlessness, pacing up and down, slowed movement and speech. So they're almost slurring their speech, and they just move at half pace. Ever had road rage when walking behind somebody in the shops? Maybe they're suffering from depression. Maybe you need to give them an encouraging smile and an encouraging word. Fatigue or loss of energy, and I learned what fatigue was when I had COVID. It is just that overwhelming draining of energy. I was tired of lying in bed, but I didn't have the energy to get up and move. And I had to force myself to roll out of bed, go to the bathroom, drag myself down the passage. And just by going to sit outside on the front veranda, I'm fortunate to have a nice front veranda surrounded by trees with a distant view of the sea. And There's birds all around. Just that sitting in the sunshine was enough to revive me and reboost my energy. But you also have these feelings of worthlessness or guilt. I'm useless. Why am I here? I shouldn't be here. I'm just a burden to everybody. All of those things are signs of depression. You have difficulty thinking, concentrating, or making decisions. Would you like a cup of tea, a cappuccino, a cup of coffee? I don't know. I want something to drink, but I don't know. You can't make a decision. Those are all issues. Recurrent thoughts of death or suicide, or more dramatically, an attempt at suicide. As I said, I see so many people coming through casualty, having overdosed on medication, or they've slashed their wrist, or things like that. Some of the more serious ones are obviously trying to shoot themselves. I remember growing up, we always heard about quite a nasty one of a guy that tried to kill himself with a shotgun and failed, and ended up with not a fun problem after, which eventually obviously led to more depression. Depression is nearly twice as common in females than males, according to the CDC. Males with depression are more likely than females to drink alcohol in excess, display anger, and engage in risk-taking as a result of the disorder. Symptoms of depression in college students may include difficulty concentrating on schoolwork, insomnia, eating too much, a decrease or increase in appetite, same symptoms as what I've just gone through, avoiding social situations and activities that they used to enjoy. And in teens, they may experience some of the following symptoms: feeling irritable, restlessness, such as an inability to sit still, withdrawing from friends and family, difficulty concentrating on schoolwork, feeling guilty, helpless, or worthless. And I'm going to stop there so that we don't run out of time over here. So we've got about 7 minutes left. I'm going to attempt to put my earpieces in again so I can hear any questions you may have or any comments you may have. Bear with me while I do this. Hopefully this will come through.
Can't hear you, Sean, but just don't worry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. I think I've got a loose wire over here. All right. Any
Yes,
comments,
sir.
any questions? Any of those symptoms sound familiar? And I can stop
Above.
recording if you would prefer me to.
Yeah.